little bit about the control arms that we're going to use and the components that make it up. This is your basic machine part that makes up the control arm. A pilot bearing, place to put spherical bearings in all corners, which I'm going to show you here in a moment. This is one that's somewhat assembled. It's got two 6008 seal bearings, one on either end. That's going to pilot our drive shaft. It's going to take the power from the differential and transfer it to the wheel. We've got 4 spherical bearings in each component, plus a pair of, this is going to be an attachment for our sway bar that's connected to it as well. These are going to be preset at the factory, and they'll be marked to show you that we've already done that with some type of marking. In this particular case, we're going to use the yellow marker, and it's going to show you that that's where we ended up in our adjustment. So somewhere along the way, if you lose that adjustment, you can always go back to it, or if you want to modify it or whatever. I'll show you what we basically did there as far as adjustment goes, and we'll look at it on this piece. It's simply a squaring type device. In this particular, these are all 5/8 spherical ends. So with a gauge, we've taken a particular number and we've gauged it on both sides, and that's going to keep you square to this, to the control arm itself. That gives you a determining number. Basically, we're about 50 thousandths larger than our 1.5 number. 1.5 is the key number in this particular case. So if they're square at the same distance away, they're going to react properly. Here's a completed control arm with the assembly in it, the split shaft. This would be the one that goes on the right-hand side. This is the drive assembly. Now these are made out of, actual shafts are made out of 8620. So they're very, very stout, been carburized and heat treated for extreme wear. So the number that we were talking about, that 1.5 number, is relevant to this pivot point. This pivot point wants to be in the center of that. The control arm itself can vary a little bit, but the actual, when we get to the bike, you'll see where that pivot point rests. They simply go together, like so. Kind of a snug fit, so they're going to be a little difficult to line up. I didn't have that lined up. Okay. We got the grease fittings on the same plane. That way you know where your lineup's going to be. So this is a real good look at how you're transferring the power from the differential to the wheel. And these are the pivot points it's going to pivot at. And it's going to take the shock tower, sorry, not the shock tower, but the shock attachment point on the control arm is done with this particular part, this welding. I'm going to show you that as we go along. I just wanted everybody to kind of get a general idea how the power arm works. That's the name comes from this particular component, which is power through the control arm. So we're transferring the power from the differential to the wheel directly through the control arm. And the reason for this is so we get a lot of down clearance for exhaust and what have you. We'll take another look at that later. But we're going to move on to actually installing this on our already onto the parts that we've already put on the bike. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to install our shaft. Simply goes in, all the way in, there we go, simple as that. We're going to put our pivot blocks in place. You can put these on, they just sit in these slots, and they go in place with a pair of 3/8 16 bolts. We're going to show you the shortcut to doing that. simply because of the fact that that's where you're going to end up. On our control arm bearings, we're going to put seals, and it's a very close situation. It's very difficult to make that when they're all tightened down on the unit. So we're going to put these together loosely before we go to the unit. Okay, got it? Screw that in here. Get started. Just so it's there. You know, we're going to tighten all this up later. Once again, bearing with the seal on it. Put the seal on the inside of the spherical bearing. Screw it into the pivot block. Okay, and we're just loosely together. Slide the control arm over the shaft. The screw started. That's going to take all the pressure off. Once again, lock in the slot. Put your screw in. Do the same thing on the bottom. Making sure when you put your control arm that your drill and tapped holes that are going to accept your shock mount are forward to the front of the body. Okay. All right. We got all 4 screws down nice and tight. Got the blocks seated in the pockets nicely. These really are. That carries the number for the pivot point on the universal joint. Goes in the proper place. Okay. All right. Now we want to bring up our bolts, our 5/8 bolts. Now that's not too bad, but when you gotta mess with these seals, it can be a problem trying to get them in because they're very close tolerance. And we don't want to put any pressure, undue pressure on our bearings, so it's all machined properly to give you the correct fit. We get into our torque wrench. 80 pounds. There you have it. The correct installation is going to be a little snug at first because the bearings are brand new and fresh. And the seals should stay stationary because they're sandwiched against the ball that's in the center of the bearing. That's what we're going to look like. So it's going to be a little bit stiff until they do some running. So then we're ready to go. So now all the tolerances are in the correct position. Your universal is ready to go. The next thing we're going to do is going to put the other half on and show you how to put the outside carrier on. To put in the outside carriers on, we're going to want to install our lug nuts into our wheel flange. So we're going to go over to press and show you how that's done. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're just going to use a deep well socket. It's a standard little press. There we go. We're going to show you how to assemble the top support tube / adjustable area for the outside carrier. Obviously the tube is, this is a left hand. The tube is marked with a line, letting you know that is the left hand side. Okay. And that's going to be your top support arm and the in the system. Okay, in preparation for our outside carrier, we're going to take our 5/8/18 fastener, put our seals on, onto our top adjusting rod, and here's our left-hand thread down at the bottom with that mark on it. Simply going to screw that in. Torque it down to 80 pounds, which is what we're doing on all of our 5/8/18 hardware. And this is going to put us ready for our outside carrier. First thing we're going to do, putting our outside carrier, is we're going to put our shaft in, find our slot, okay, load it, and slide our outside carrier in. And it's going to be fastener, seal, same thing on the other side. Get everybody started in place. This one's a little tougher because you gotta snake those seals in when they're slotted. Our seals lined up, slide it in place. Line up your seals with the bearing, so that you can get your fastener in place.